Monday, June 29th, 1995, began as another sweltering summer day in Seoul's affluent Gangnam district. The Sampoong department store, its distinctive salmon-pink exterior gleaming in the morning sun, prepared to welcome its usual crowd of 40,000 daily visitors. This five-story luxury mall had become a symbol of South Korea's meteoric economic rise, a temple of prosperity, where designer handbags sold for thousands of dollars and imported tea sets cost more than cars. But something was wrong that morning. Store employees arriving for their shifts noticed the unusually humid air inside. The building's massive air conditioning system had been shut down. In the basement levels, workers felt inexplicable cold drafts where there should have been none. On the fifth floor, restaurant staff watched as cups placed on tables slowly slid to one side. These were the final warning signs in a chain of events that had begun years earlier. In just over 12 hours, this monument to luxury retail would collapse in what remains South Korea's deadliest peacetime disaster. More than 1,500 people would be trapped inside when 5 stories of concrete and steel pancaked down in barely 20 seconds, the length of the Korean Happy Birthday song.
생일 축하합니다. 생일 축하합니다. 생일 축하합니다. 지구에서 우주에서 제일 사랑합니다.
The story of the Sampoongs is more than just a building failure. It's a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition, of warnings ignored, and of the deadly price of corruption. Most importantly, it's the story of the 502 lives lost when the pursuit of profit was prioritized over human safety. In 1990, when Sampoong department store first opened its doors, it represented everything South Korea aspired to be. Government records show the mall generated an astonishing 500 million won, approximately $400,000, in daily revenue. Numbers that would make even established retailers envious. The building itself was a statement, explains Dr. Kim Ji-hoon, an economist specializing in 1990s Korean development. 5 stories above ground, 4 basement levels, all finished in imported marble and glass. It wasn't just a shopping center, it was Korea announcing its arrival on the world stage. Department store records reveal a carefully orchestrated retail ecosystem. The basement levels housed an affordable food court, drawing office workers and students, while the ground floor showcased imported luxury goods, and the upper levels featured designer boutiques. The 5th floor's upscale restaurant served dishes costing weeks' worth of an average worker's salary. Lee Min-seo, a former Sampoong employee who worked at a first-floor cosmetics counter, provides a first-hand account of those days. We had strict protocols for everything. The marble floors had to gleam perfectly. Even the air was regulated. Specific fragrances were pumped through the ventilation system at different times of day. Nothing was left to chance. But beneath this meticulously maintained facade, structural engineers had been documenting disturbing issues. Building inspection records from 1990 to 1995 revealed that the very features that made Sampoong spectacular also made it dangerous. The gleaming marble floors. According to engineering reports, they added 2.5 times more weight than the originally planned materials. The central atrium that impressed shoppers? Its construction had required removing key support columns. The prestigious 5th floor restaurants? They sat on a level that original blueprints show was never meant to exist. When you look at the engineering data, notes Professor Park Sun-woo of Seoul National University's Architecture Department, You see a building that was literally being crushed by its own luxury. The original plans called for a 4-story residential building, but every deviation from that plan added another crack in the foundation, both literally and figuratively. In 1987, the construction records revealed a critical moment in the Sampoong story. Lee Jun, chairman of the Sampoong Group, commissioned the respected Woosung Construction for their mission, a 4-story residential complex. The engineering documents tell us something significant. Woosung's design featured the robust safety margins that Korean construction was known for. What happened next appears in a trail of internal memos, each more concerning than the last. Lee's vision had expanded dramatically beyond the original scope. A simple apartment building was no longer enough. He now demanded a luxury department store. When Woosung's engineers delivered their professional assessment that this change would require a complete redesign from the ground up, Lee made the decision that would seal the building's fate. The documentation is chilling. Dr. Lee Hun-woo speaks with the weight of his experience on the post-collapse investigation team. We found Woosung's formal letter of withdrawal. Its words still haunt me today. Their reason was stated in black and white: insurmountable safety concerns. They wrote it explicitly, without any ambiguity. The proposed changes would make the building unstable. And Lee's response to this professional warning? He simply hired contractors who would follow his demands. The technical compromises were meticulously documented in the building records. Their true significance remained hidden until after the disaster. The original blueprints demanded robust support columns, 80 centimeters in diameter, strengthened with 16 steel rods. But the revised plans tell a different story. The columns were reduced to 60 centimeters, with only 8 rods, a change that halved their ability to bear weight. Professor Kim Min-ji of the Korean Institute of Construction Safety brings clarity to these numbers. Imagine the columns as legs supporting a table. The original design called for strong, sturdy legs, but Lee's changes were like replacing them with thin ones, while doubling the weight they needed to hold. The most dangerous change came with the 5th floor's addition. The original building permits reveal a critical number. The structure was engineered to support 1,040 kilograms per square meter, but the 5th floor brought crushing new demands: restaurants, industrial kitchens, and traditional Korean floor heating systems. Together, they forced 1,530 kilograms onto every square meter. The evidence shows Sampoong's own engineers knew the dangers. A 1990 memo speaks volumes. It warned about 3 15-ton air conditioning units installed on the roof. The memo's words were crystal clear. This single change exceeded design limits by 400%. By April 1995, the Sampoong department store was literally crying out for help. Civil engineering reports reveal the alarming progression of structural failures. Water began seeping through hairline cracks in the 5th floor ceiling. Building maintenance logs tell us a chilling detail. These cracks grew wider with each passing week. Lee Jong-woo, a former maintenance supervisor, shares his haunting testimony. We filed daily reports about new problems. The vibrations from the rooftop air conditioning units were intense, so strong that customers on the 5th floor watched their coffee cups ripple, like that scene from Jurassic Park. But this wasn't Hollywood entertainment. This was real life at stake. Security logs from June 1995 document the building's final desperate warnings. On June 27th, the night guard reported something terrifying. A basketball-sized hole had appeared in the roof near the air conditioning units. The next day brought more signs of impending disaster. Restaurant workers watched their refrigerators sliding across supposedly level floors. Load-bearing sensors revealed a shocking truth. The 5th floor had developed a 15-degree tilt. June 29, 1995 marked the final countdown. 7 a.m., the air conditioning system failed completely. 11 a.m., restaurant staff discovered ceiling cracks now wide enough to insert a hand. 1 p.m., security footage captured the first chunks of concrete falling in the 5th floor restaurant area. 2 p.m., an emergency board meeting convened. 4 p.m., structural engineers delivered their urgent evacuation recommendation. 5 p.m., Lee Jun and executives abandoned the building. 5:40 p.m., staff began removing valuable merchandise. 5:50 p.m., they finally made the first evacuation announcement. Chang Mi-sun, a former boutique manager, describes the surreal atmosphere. The executives were clearly worried enough to leave, worried enough to save luxury goods, but not worried enough to evacuate immediately. They kept insisting everything was under control, even as we watched the cracks spread across the ceiling. The minutes from that final board meeting tell us the most damning truth of all. These documents, later recovered from the rubble, reveal their priorities in stark detail. While the building crumbled around them, executives debated not about saving lives, but about saving face. One executive worried that evacuation would damage the store's reputation. They even calculated the lost revenue down to the last one. At 5:50 p.m., with the building's death throes now echoing throughout the structure, management finally ordered an evacuation. For most of those inside, it would prove tragically too late. At exactly 5:52 p.m., June 29, 1995, seismic monitors at the Korea Institute of Geoscience and Mineral Resources detected what they thought was a small earthquake in Seoul's Gangnam district. What their instruments had captured was the beginning of South Korea's deadliest structural failure. The engineering analysis reveals the brutal simplicity of how it began. The compromised roof finally surrendered to the weight of the air conditioning units. Dr. Park Jin-woo, lead investigator, explains the devastating chain reaction. The failure spread like a wave of destruction. When the roof gave way, it sent 3 15-ton air conditioning units crashing through the 5th floor. What followed was a progressive collapse, now studied by engineering students as the definitive example of catastrophic structural failure. Survivor Kim Young-mi's account brings us inside those terrifying final moments. First, the lights flickered above us. Then came a sound like thunder from above. The floor began to shake beneath our feet, and then everything, people, display cases, all of it, started sliding toward the center of the building. The collapse moved with merciless efficiency. 5 hours, 52 minutes and 0 seconds p.m., the roof surrenders. 5 hours, 52 minutes and 7 seconds, the 5th floor gives way. 5 hours, 52 minutes and 13 seconds, the progressive collapse begins. 5 hours, 52 minutes and 20 seconds, final structural failure. In just 20 seconds, the time it takes to sing Happy Birthday in Korean, a 5-story structure that had taken years to build transformed into a concrete and steel grave barely 40 feet high. The first cry for help reached emergency services at 5 hours 52 minutes and 30 seconds p.m. Within minutes, the area surrounding Sampoong transformed into a scene of controlled chaos. Emergency response records document an overwhelming show of force. 126 emergency vehicles converged on the site within the first hour. But the rescuers confronted a scenario that would test the limits of their training and experience. The building's outer walls, though still standing, had become deadly sentinels, threatening to collapse at any moment, endangering both victims and their would-be saviors. Fire Chief Park Sung-bae, who orchestrated the initial response, explains the devastating complexity they faced. This wasn't like an earthquake or bombing where debris scatters outward. We faced what we call a pancake collapse. Each floor had compressed down onto the one below, creating a layered trap of concrete and steel. Every choice carried impossible weight. Using heavy equipment might save time, but kill survivors. Working by hand meant we could preserve lives, but at the cost of precious minutes and hours. The rescue operation revealed the harsh arithmetic of survival. Life and death balanced on a cruel equation. The presence of an air pocket, a void space where fallen debris had created a lifeline of oxygen. The emergency logs tell the story in stark numbers. First hour, 47 souls pulled from the wreckage. First 24 hours, 126 people returned to their families. First week, 28 more miraculous rescues. But then came a moment that defied all medical and scientific expectations. On July 10th, 11 days after the collapse, rescuers detected a voice rising from deep within the concrete tomb. Lee Sung-hyun, a 21-year-old store clerk, had survived in a space barely larger than his own body. His first words upon emerging into the light revealed the profound depth of Korean family bonds. "I'm sorry I worried my mother." The Sampung rescue operation would transform our understanding of human survival in disaster scenarios. After the first week, conventional emergency response doctrine suggested a grim conclusion. Yet the concrete tomb continued to protect pockets of life, each survivor expanding our knowledge of human resilience. Among these extraordinary stories stands that of Jia, a basement-level employee who endured for 13 days as her world literally shrank around her. From her hospital bed, she shared her haunting experience. "At first, I could sit up in my concrete prison, but day by day the weight above caused the space to compress. By the end, the ceiling pressed against my nose. Through it all, one thought sustained me: my mother and how she always worried. That connection became my lifeline to survival." Dr. Kim from Seoul National University Hospital explains the fascinating science behind these seemingly impossible survivals. The human body operates within precise survival windows. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. What made Sampung unique was an extraordinary convergence of conditions. The collapsed structure had created protective air pockets, natural survival chambers formed by fallen debris. Rainwater, typically a threat to rescue operations, became a lifeline as it seeped through cracks. And while the temperatures were far from comfortable, they remained within survivable ranges. This tragic event has revolutionized our understanding of disaster survival. Each person rescued beyond that critical first week challenged our assumptions about human endurance. Their stories now inform emergency response protocols worldwide, teaching us never to abandon hope too quickly. Even as rescue teams work to save lives, Professor Lan Chung of Dankook University began leading South Korea's most comprehensive building failure analysis. What his team uncovered would reshape construction oversight across the nation. The structural analysis revealed devastating shortcuts in the building's very foundations. Concrete samples told a shocking story. Builders had used seawater instead of fresh water in the mixture, a decision that slashed the concrete's structural strength by 40%. The support columns, meant to be the building's backbone, contained only half the required reinforcing rods. Even the floor slabs had been compromised, poured 10 centimeters thinner than engineering specifications demanded. But the paper trail exposed something even more sinister, a network of corruption that had enabled these deadly choices to continue unchecked. 12 city officials had accepted bribes to approve fraudulent inspections. Safety warnings vanished into bureaucratic black holes. Construction permits for dangerous modifications received approval without proper engineering review. Professor Chung's final assessment cuts through any ambiguity. This was not an accident. Every decision made by Lee Jun and his executives reflected a clear choice: profit over human safety. The collapse wasn't a surprise. It was the inevitable consequence of hundreds of conscious decisions to ignore fundamental engineering principles. The security camera footage from those final hours reveals the most damning truth of all. While executives orchestrated the careful removal of valuable merchandise, they left unknowing customers browsing the aisles above. Former board member Park, who later broke ranks to testify against his colleagues, revealed the chilling focus of that final emergency meeting. The preservation of luxury goods took precedence over human life. The December 1995 trial of Lee Jun and his executives marked a watershed moment in South Korean corporate accountability. For the first time, the nation witnessed powerful business leaders facing genuine consequences for choosing profit over human life. The court proceedings exposed a depth of corporate corruption that stunned even those familiar with business misconduct. The prosecution's evidence painted a devastating picture of calculated negligence. Construction records revealed that Lee had received and ignored 20 separate safety warnings. His response never varied: continue operations, minimize costs. The financial documents exposed a chilling calculation. By skipping essential safety measures, the company had saved approximately $7 million in construction costs. This translated to roughly $14,000 in savings for each life ultimately lost in the collapse. When the court delivered its verdict, the sentences shattered precedent. Lee Jun received 7.5 years for criminal negligence. His son faced 7 years behind bars. But perhaps most significantly, the court ordered something unprecedented: the complete liquidation of the Lee family fortune, approximately $300 million, to compensate the victims. Dr. Park Jin-woo, an expert in corporate governance, explains the lasting impact. The Sampoong trial fundamentally transformed Korean corporate culture. Before this case, business leaders operated as though they were above the law, virtual kings in their corporate kingdoms. This verdict sent a clear message that even the most powerful could no longer hide behind their wealth when their decisions cost lives. The Sampoong collapse forced South Korea to confront the true cost of its pali-pali, or hurry-hurry, culture. This national drive for rapid development had created modern miracles, but at what price? A nationwide inspection of high-rise buildings revealed a shocking truth: only 2% fully met safety standards. A staggering 84% needed significant repairs, while 14% were deemed so dangerous they required complete reconstruction. The government's response became the most sweeping building safety reform in Korean history. They mandated structural reinspection of all buildings over 15 years old and introduced criminal penalties for safety violations. New independent safety committees gained real oversight power, while whistleblowers received legal protection for reporting concerns. But Dr. Kim Min-ji, a sociologist studying this transformation, identifies an even deeper change in Korean society. Before Sampoong, people simply trusted that newer meant safer. The collapse shattered that illusion. Suddenly, citizens began questioning the true cost of rapid development. Safety transformed from a bureaucratic checkbox into a national conversation. Today, the former disaster site presents a complex statement about memory and progress. Luxury apartments now rise where 502 people lost their lives, a decision that sparked intense debate about how nations should remember preventable tragedies. The official memorial stands removed from the scene in Yangjai Citizens Forest, far from Gangnam's bustling streets. Yet the real memorial exists in the transformed skyline of modern Seoul. Today's buildings proudly display their thick support columns and prominent safety features, visual reminders of lessons written in loss. Mr. Young, who lost 3 daughters in the collapse, offers the most powerful perspective. The true memorial isn't carved in stone. It lives in every building inspection that prevents another tragedy, every safety regulation that saves a life. My daughters, including my blind daughter who had overcome so much to become a university professor, died because of human greed. But their deaths taught Korea that true progress demands more than speed. It requires responsibility. The Sampoong collapse stands as a powerful warning about the deadly price of unchecked corporate greed. Yet it also demonstrates how tragedy can transform a nation, not just its building codes, but its very cultural DNA. The disaster forced South Korea to confront difficult questions about progress, profit, and human life. The answers they found helped forge a society where safety and accountability became cornerstones of development. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more historical documentaries.